Hello, Darshan Maharaja here. We are living in interesting times. As you know, that's a curse from the Chinese culture. Being in interesting times is kind of unpleasant. When times are not interesting, is when everything is tranquil. And I'm talking, of course, politically. These are interesting times. Lots of moving parts, and difficult to say with certainty what the future holds for Canadians and for Canada, in fact. Uh, from the Conservative Party's point of view, the interesting part, i.e., uncomfortable part, is the rapid decline in their electoral fortunes. For the longest time, it seemed like it was a slam dunk for them to get a super majority. But unusual times don't last for long, so this is not entirely surprising. Although there are details to get into, which I will in a moment. First of all, there are three factors at play here. First is the dumps in which the Liberal Party was in opinion polls was, it is clear now, largely due to Prime Minister Trudeau's presence at the head of that party, although they tried to keep denying it until maybe fall last year, 2024. But then it became clear, and Prime Minister Trudeau decided to announce that he is stepping aside. He has not stepped aside yet, but it is expected that once the Liberal leadership contest is over, the presumed winner of that contest, Mark Carney, some people are calling it his coronation, uh, he will take over the helm from Prime Minister Trudeau and become an unelected Prime Minister. But any new leader was going to improve uh, the polling numbers for the Liberal Party. That is clear. Secondly, the wild card here is President Trump, who has thrown a lot of accusations and threats at Canada, including making Canada 51st state, which I don't think anybody takes it all that seriously, but it is affecting the public's mood. And a country that Prime Minister Trudeau years ago described as a post nation state has suddenly found its nationalism. So that factor is bound to play into the current opinion polls as well. And thirdly, in view of Mark Carney's credentials as former governor of Bank of Canada and Bank of England, um, there is a perception, or at least it can be sold, that perception, that he is better equipped to deal with President Trump's threats and to negotiate with him better than anybody else. So that is also playing into the numbers that we are seeing in opinion polls now. But talking of the opinion polls themselves, uh, there is some doubt in my mind as to how representative of the reality some of them are, not all. And let me emphasize here, it is entirely natural for the Liberal Party's fortunes to have improved, but the degree to which and the speed with which they are supposed to have improved, according to some of these polls, is what creates doubt in my mind. I'll just cite two opinion polls that stand out in this regard. Both of them showing Liberal Party gaining a majority in the next election. One was based on 600 plus respondents. I think the number was in the mid 600s, and of Ontario respondents only. So I don't think it is valid to extrapolate that nationally, because when you exclude the prairies, especially where the Conservatives have an overwhelming advantage, you are bound to get a skewed result. And then you extrapolate Ontario onto the entire country. Then I'm not sure if that's a valid conclusion to draw, that there will be a Liberal majority government. Another one which came out, I think, yesterday or day before, uh, that was based on, again, it showed liberals in the lead, but it was based on 210 respondents with almost 7% margin of error. Normally, the margin of error is 3% plus minus, not 7%, because then you are, creating room in that poll for massive swings. And the picture presented will definitely not be representative of reality. And normally, the number of respondents in opinion polls of this nature tends to vary between 1,000 to 1,500. Typically, they are around 1,200 plus, but minimum 1,000, and on the top end, I have seen 1,500. So, opinion polls of 600 people in one province or 210 people is, I don't think these are credible polls. But the problem is that these numbers then get into the aggregator polls like 338 Canada. They are just taking the numbers from various polls and then processing them. So, as it says in the book of morphology, uh, a spoonful of garbage in a barrel full of champagne gives you a barrel full of garbage. Then you don't have champagne in that barrel. So that these are the reservations that I have been having over the past few weeks. Uh, Now, this morning, Abacus data came out with a poll which once again shows conservatives in majority territory, 40% plus and 180 plus seats. So they are comfortably in the majority territory, although not in super majority. And that is to be expected given the developments that have taken place that I narrated just now. That was to be expected. But uh, with all this said, the question is whether the conservatives need to change their communication strategy. If you follow me on Twitter, alias X, you will know that I have been talking about this for a long time, back when immigration was the biggest issue, and they stuck to the slogan of X the tax. And I said, this is now no longer resonating with people. It is not in consonance with what they are feeling about the state of the country at the moment. But again, talking of the Abacus poll that came out this morning, uh, they have given, and you can check it out on Twitter, uh, they have given very good reasons as to why it is a statistical improbability for so much liberal support in, for example, Ontario, where if you believe one, then you have to disbelieve the second. So again, it's up to the consumer of that data set to decide whether they believe the other polls or the Abacus poll. But the statistical incongruity between the two is very well highlighted. I encourage you to check it out. But again, coming back to the communication strategy, uh, there has been a good deal of criticism, typically from the left or left leaning journalists and commentators, of the tendency to create a slogan, three-word slogan, which can be represented by the formula verb, the noun, like X the tax or stop the crime, things like that. In general, as a principle, this is quite effective because now you are keeping it short, stupid. But that is no longer the environment in which this kind of sloganeering can work. A lot of people are, I'm digressing a little bit here, but a lot of people are saying that the bump in liberal polling is like that of Kamala Harris or even that of Kim Campbell back in 1993 when she her party experienced a similar bump in opinion polls, but then went on to lose in a historic manner. I would, if I was the conservative strategist, I would advise against complacency. by this thought. I'm not suggesting that they are being complacent, but this would be my advice. The initial bump or whatever, you have to look at the overall trend. And as the overall trend, as I see it, says, uh, there is a marked shift in favor of liberals. So previously, whereas it was going to be a slam dunk for a super majority, now the conservatives will have to work hard for a strong majority. Somebody this morning, summarized this communication strategy of Conservative Party in a very neatly encapsulated form, saying that Mark Carney is competing against Trump and Pierre Poilievre is competing against Trudeau. So I found this very meaningful because so far everything that I have seen from the Conservative Party harkens back to the Trudeau era, which for all intents and purposes is over. Now it's a beginning of a new era. It may be short-lived, but it is a new era. And therefore they have to change gears, which they haven't. Describing Mark Carney as carbon tax Carney, I mean, let go of your infatuation with carbon tax. It will become relevant, hopefully, at some point in the future, but right now it isn't. Apart from uh, describing how they would make Canadian economy less dependent on the United States, I think the conservatives have also to uh, tell Canadians as to how they will insulate it in the interim. Because if you are talking about uh, building pipelines so that we can export our energy resources to more countries rather than depending solely on the United States, those projects are going to take years to implement. And I'm being optimistic here. The amount of opposition that I can foresee against these projects is going to be heavy. But even if it takes you a few years, what do you do in the interim? Because if President Trump slaps tariffs and does all sorts of other things that hamper the Canadian economy, then you need a plan in between, which, to my mind, they have a very useful strength in that regard because conservative MP Jamil Jivani is a former classmate of US Vice President J.D. Vance. So maybe they can work out some kind of a communication strategy that does not give away their plan, but still gives enough detail for people to be convinced that while the conservative government, if it forms, will work on the factors that have brought about this crisis for Canada, in the interim, they have a plan to hold off President Trump. Instead of that, they are, I would say, obsessing about when Brookfield changed its location from Canada to United States. As a general rule, if you need to take a few minutes to explain to your audience in this kind of a situation what your point is, then you have lost. They will tune out. I'll give you a simple example. When it came to the Sustainable Technologies Development Corporation, the message was very short and succinct. They stole $400 million. Takes 4 seconds to say that, and now the audience is tuned to hear what you have to say. Whereas in the case of this brouhaha about Brookfield and it changing its headquarters from Canada to US, you have to go into the dates which stretch across 2 months, board resolution, annual general meeting of shareholder, chairmanship, corporate law. People have tuned out by the time you have finished saying, or even halfway through. And that is, I'm being optimistic here. If you last halfway through that messaging, you have a good attention span, or maybe you are trained in that field. So hammering on this Brookfield issue is not relevant right now. The conservatives have to elaborate how they will hold off the immediate challenge or threat, as you see it, from the United States or from President Trump, and do that in a manner that does not require the audience's long attention span. Again, not sloganeering like X the tax, stop the crime, balance the budget. Even a few days ago, when Mr. Polyev had a press conference here in Toronto, I was there, and uh, the slogan at the podium, the printed thing that they keep as a main message of the press conference, was fix the budget. And I thought this is not the right time for that. There was a time, and maybe there will be a time, but right now that's not the time. People are wanting to know how you will deal with the situation with President Trump, and you need to have a message that can be said in 4 or 5 seconds. Then, and that 4 or 5 seconds cannot be comprehensive, of course, but it has to be such that it evokes interest from the listener, and then they are keen to hear the details. That is what I would advise if I were the advisor to Conservative Party of Canada on their communications. Let me know what you think about this whole situation and how conservatives should handle their communication strategy. I'll see you again in the next episode. Until then, goodbye and be well.